All right, let's fire away. Go ahead, Paul.
Who are you picking in round one?
Give me the first 27 and I'll tell you. But if you can't give me accurate 27, I won't tell you. 28.
How hard is the, trying to predict the back end of a round at that point? Do you feel like you can be comfortable knowing about what that universe will be, or do you expect a lot of unpredictability this year?
That's a good question. It's very hard for me to assess everyone else's needs and what they're going to do and who they like. We'll have 28 guys ranked in order. We'll be ready to go when our turn comes up. We'll have good options. We feel like there'll be some good options for us, and we just can't control who it'll be. But we'll be ready no matter who goes ahead of us.
Drafting at the end of the rounds, I know that was newer last year. Do you think that helps you this year? Kind of projecting.
I don't know if it's every draft's a little different, so I don't know that it helps or hurts. We try to evaluate each individual player, rank them amongst the group, and go off of our thoughts and try to get cohesion between the scouts and the coaches and ownership and so we feel like we've done that process. We feel like we're in a good space to go forward. We feel like there's good options, but we just don't know what those options will be when we go. And when we go, we'll go.
Most of the talk this year is that there's not a big number of blue chip, but there's a lot of really good football players. When that's the case, if there's only less than a handful of blue chip, does it make it even tougher for predictability standpoint? I mean, you have a lot of really good players and they could really fall anywhere.
I think that's accurate. I think that it's hard to predict even the very top of this draft. I think that the quarterbacks will probably come off. They always do. The position is so important. So sometimes you can predict which quarterbacks will go ahead of you. Other than that, I don't think it's easy to predict the top 10 of this draft. Some drafts are probably a little easier.
Did signing the two tight ends change your mind on anything, what you do at that position, or is it completely independent of how the board would fall?
We'll assess it as it goes, but having those two tight ends on board is great. You want guys with experience, guys and sample. I think we know what we're going to get out of him, and he'll provide good reps for us this year. He's still got some rehab to come, and we feel good about Irv and what he's going to bring to our team. So if we get an opportunity to add a young guy, we're not going to turn it down. We don't eliminate any position in the draft. If you start doing that, you run out of players, and so we're going to look at every position and what's available. And if the best guy available is a tight end, we'll probably go that route.
What's harder, picking towards the top or picking towards the bottom? What's tougher for you?
I don't know. The process is the same for us, whether you're picking one or whether you're picking, 32nd. We're going to evaluate everybody and we're going to rank them for us and our team. And so the process is the same. When you're picking first, you're also picking 33rd. So that's not too different than picking 28th or 29th or 30th. Once the draft gets rolling, it's the same process for us. Sometimes it's maybe a little smaller universe when you're up top. And I've always said that having a wide universe down at the bottom of the first round is something that's kind of nice. There's a bigger pool of opportunity and a bigger pool of guys who are worthy of that pick than maybe a top 5 pick.
Kind of on that note, you guys have traded back in the second round numerous times. Doesn't happen as much, people going out of the first. How much is just the reluctance to want to give up the 5th-year option that you have there a reason why? Would that make you more reluctant to move out of the first round? Is that a part of an equation why you?
Not really. I think if you have a player that's performing well, you're talking to him about an extension anyway, rather than going into the 5th-year option. But we'll see. We'll see. Sometimes those can't get done, and the 5th-year option is nice, but it's also an expensive option.
I know you're always listening, but I mean, is this a spot where you would be particularly willing or interested in moving back out of the first round here?
Yeah, it could be. It's all hypothetical. you've got to have somebody that wants to move in, and so you've got to have a player worthy in somebody else's mind of coming up and giving up picks or players or future picks for a guy. So if he's that good for some other team, maybe he's good for you too. So it's all dependent. How convicted are you on the guy that is available that you will be picking, and how much you're getting in return. But we'll look at it if it comes up. But it's all hypothetical right now.
When do you start, like if you're doing a trade, or if you're thinking about a trade, do you start doing that a couple days, a day before, or is it during the round, or how does it?
No, what happens in advance is just feeling out, and everybody's open to trading. So you call around and you say, hey, gee, hypothetically, if we want to come up from 38 to 28, are you guys interested? Sure, give us a call. Those are the feeling outs.
Does that happen
No, the only really thing that in my mind matters is what happens in the moment, and what happens as your pick is approaching. What's the conversations, in the days leading up to it normally are not the ones that matter that much, in my opinion.
Without naming names, was the phone ringing last year for people wanting to come up to 31?
God, last year's a long time ago. I'm not sure I can remember that. The phone rings all the time. Sometimes we answer, sometimes we don't.
Duke, does the draft strategy change for you guys, considering the success you guys have had the last 2 years, and maybe wanting to get more pro-ready players that can help you immediately rather than some long-term guys?
Yeah, we're never looking for guys that are going to take forever. You just don't have them. The nature of our league and the way it's structured is that you need to get performance out of your guys early in their careers. And, after 4 years, they're not yours anymore. And you have to decide whether to re-sign them or not. So the days of long-term development and looking for guys that are going to produce 4 and 5 and 6 years down the road, that doesn't happen. So, we want all of our players to have a role, when they come in the building, and then try to grow that role the best they can. But, you only have 53 and you only have 48 dressed on game day. So you want everybody that's in that mix to have a real role and be ready to go.
Year 5 with Zach, obviously the same coordinators as well. Does that help during this process?
Sure.
What fits them, what fits you, et cetera?
Sure. The more you work with somebody, the more you're around them. I think the more you can gel with them and understand their points of view and what they're looking for and how they operate and what they mean when they say certain things. So familiarity is great in scouting. That's what makes our scouting staff good. We've been around each other a long time. And we've, kind of merged our philosophies over the years, and the guys that started here are now at a point where they're really contributing, and they're relied upon. Our scouting staff, in my mind, is fantastic, and I rely heavily on them. The whole team relies heavily on them. In this area, it's Mike Potts, leading the show, and in free agency, it's Steve and Trey and Christian and Andrew are invaluable to us, and so those guys are great resources, and they're really the ones really on the oar, making us go. And so we've been around each other a long time, and that, continuity in any group is important.
As Mike's role has grown, has your process changed? Not that you're more hands-off, but that some of the things that you do, is it different at all?
I try to go about a similar process myself. I've got to get myself ready to have an opinion as well. We try to make decisions based on consensus. We try to get everybody on board and feeling good about it, and that's what we spend a lot of time trying to do leading up to the draft and leading up to free agency, is getting everybody on board with the plan and the players that we're highly interested in. And when you can have players walking in the building that everybody's pulling for, everybody was a part of, that's normally a good situation.
What's your favorite part of the draft process? Do you have something that you particularly enjoy the most?
Yeah, probably the pizza right after college free agency. Yeah, once it's over. It's a grind up until then.
Yeah.
It feels like every year this is a conversation, but even more this year because of one specific player. But what's your philosophy on the shift about taking a running back in the first round, given the storylines of their trajectory and when, a running back reaches a certain age, what happens to them? Just what are your thoughts on it?
Just in general, any position group is hard to eliminate. You start eliminating it, you can't get to 28. So if you say we're not going to take a running back, or we're not going to take a tight end, or we're not going to take a receiver, or we're not going to take, once you eliminate a position group or two, you can't get to 28 anymore. And you end up with third and fourth round picks in your top 28. So we're open to any position that presents itself if they're the best player available. And if they're clearly the best player and they will have a role on our team, we'll certainly consider it. I do probably eliminate specialists from that first round category, but other than that, it's hard to eliminate. And I don't think we'll be taking a quarterback up there, but everything else is wide open.
You guys haven't traditionally taken a defensive lineman in the first round. Is that just kind of coincidence?
Probably happenstance. I hadn't thought about that until I read it. One of you guys wrote that, and I was like, well, gee, Paul's right. Maybe we will, So it's just happenstance and kind of opportunities that have been there and haven't been there for us, and maybe this will be the year. Who knows?
Kind of going off what you said about, doors open for any position, early in the draft. Does it shift at all with you guys adding Orlando Brown in free agency at offensive tackle in the first round?
You always look at what you have on your team, but again, you don't eliminate positions and young players coming in that are really talented. So it's nice to have good players on your team already. It takes some of the heat off for sure.
Are there, in planning for the future, are there certain positions that you guys view as chances to maybe save money, getting an experienced player in the future through free agency? And if so, how does that maybe impact the draft and how you're viewing certain positions?
I don't believe you can save much money in free agency. That hasn't been the history of free agency. I think you try to build your team at every opportunity you can, and free agency hits before the draft, and you try to do as much as you can there. You try to maintain as many of your good players as you can, get them signed before they get to free agency, or re-sign them when free agency starts, or bring in guys from other teams. That's the first piece of the off-season program, and so you try to make as much happen, for your team in a positive direction there. Then the draft hits. I don't view the draft as just a fill-in component of the offseason. The draft is unpredictable, and you have to be flexible in building your team through the draft and taking advantage of guys when they're available to you, because we don't get to dictate what positions are available to us. And then there's post-draft, there's college free agency, and then there's, another wave of regular free agency that you build. And there's always the waiver wire, and then there's always final cuts. And so the building process doesn't really stop as you go. There's just, you have to take advantage of everyone when it presents itself to you.
You guys have really leaned into the idea of double dipping at a position. A lot of times back-to-back picks are close together. Is there something to that strategy that's advantageous other than just two?
It's not by design. It's just what the draft has given us. We don't go into it saying we're going to take a second and third round DB. If the draft presents that to us, and those are the best players available when we're going, and they fit our team, and we have a vision for them, in the now and the future, then yeah, we'll go for it. But it's not a strategy or a plan.
How important was it?
I was just to say back to take quarterback off the board in the first round. Obviously, ideally, Joe's your quarterback the next 5, 6, 7, whatever years it is. Where's the interest level in drafting a possible backup with a late round pick, or are you guys set?
Yeah, I think once the draft gets going, that's certainly a possibility. If that's the best player available, and we feel like he's going to fit a role and a need for us, we'll certainly consider that as it goes.
How important was adding Sidney Jones, Terrell Basham? The tight ends obviously were mentioned. These maybe not big name free agents, but to fill out the roster ahead of the draft so you can go.
Yeah, you want to have guys that you have positive feel for, and when we go about looking at free agency, we grade guys that are going to get a lot of money, and we grade guys that are going to be in the middle, and we grade guys that are going to be at the bottom. But when we bring a guy in, it's because we have a vision and a role for him in mind, and we believe in the player. And so those opportunities presented themselves, and there's a vision, there's a role, and there's a belief, and let's go ahead and go forward. And then, from a pay standpoint, it tends to be market driven. Sometimes it's opportunity driven. We're a team that people want to come to, and people believe that if they sign on a 1-year contract here, they might have a chance to really elevate themselves, a la Hayden Hurst or something. So sometimes that plays into it. But again, it's roster building in stages, and we try to take advantage of every stage we can.
What did you like about Nick Scott, bringing him in, with his ascension, being former 7th round pick? What did you like about him?
Yeah, he was an interesting guy because at every stage of us looking at him, we got more and more interested, and then we were able to bring him in and meet him, and really felt there's a connection there. And again, it's important for our coaching staff to weigh in on how they would use him and how he fits our scheme. And we do a lot of research behind the scenes on guys, and he was a guy at every turn that impressed us. And so he was on our minds, and we were obviously on his mind, so it worked out.
I guess you could say this is a two-part question, but I know Joe Burrow and his contract's been one of the big focuses, and obviously over the last month, the draft next weekend is your main focus. But have you been able to start the negotiation process with T and Logan? And with uncertainty there, not knowing at this point with any of these guys that are coming up for extensions, not knowing what their future holds, how much does that affect this draft? In the first round, you're very focused on the best player available, but at some point you do switch to need. So how does that work itself out for you?
Well, it's something we think about all the time. The contract things, you can't predict when and if they'll get done. We're working to try to have as many good players on our football team as we can, and try to keep them as long as we can. The ones that are producing and really fit well here, we're trying like heck to get those guys extended, renegotiated, however, signed after their contract expires. But in terms of how it affects the draft, I don't think it necessarily does. We try to maximize each year, and so we do have a certain number of guys under contract for this year. Whether we can get them extended beyond that or not, the hope is that we could. But when we go into the draft, we're still cognizant of what is important, not only this year but 2 years from now or so forth. But we're not a heavy needs, we got to have a safety in the 5th round. We don't do that. We let the 5th round come and see what the best players are. And then if there are like players, and there always are 2 or 3 or 4 guys that we like, then we can pick the position that maybe best fits us right now or maybe into the future. But we're not jumping guys ahead of more talented players based on a position. It's just something that, over the years we just haven't done. I don't think it's a smart philosophy to say, we're going to turn down these 3rd round picks to drop down and take this 4th or 5th round talent because he fits the positional need that we want. You end up regretting that normally. They don't get better just because you draft them earlier.
What does this final week of draft prep look like for you specifically? Are you sleeping much at this point?
I sleep okay. Do I look like I'm not sleeping? This is the best it gets. We try to work smart. We don't grind on our guys and keep them here at midnight and that kind of stuff. We think if we're working smart early in the process, we can work smart late in the process. So we're working smart, and we don't spend all night here.
Based on to, I guess maybe add to that, the continuity and consistency of the scouting department, the coaching staff. You mentioned getting on the same page. The fact that you guys have been working together all that time, does that help you get on the same page quicker so you don't have to grind till 2, 3 in the morning? Do you find working efficiently even easier.
Yeah, and there's a trust factor, between guys that you've worked with for a while.
Right.
And we certainly trust our coaching staff to put the work in to have opinions in this area, and they trust us to put the work in to have opinions in this area. There's very little acrimony, there's very little, heavy, hard conversations. I think there's a respect for opinion, running both directions. And when that happens, then you can just have dialogue and try to get to the point where everyone's comfortable with ultimately where we're going to assign them on our draft board and whether or not we would take them.
So there's never, probably not many north and south pole disagreements. They're probably a little bit closer, right?
Yeah.
You guys aren't on opposite ends of the spectrum very often, haven't worked together as long as you have.
Sometimes it happens, but we work towards agreement on it,
Yeah.
We work towards agreement. We want everybody forming their own opinion. We don't want really groupthink and scouting. We want people working independently to form their own opinions, then come into the group and give that opinion.
Right.
That's what's valuable. It's not a guy that knows what the opinion is that then comes in with the same opinion.
Right.
That provides no benefit to the end product. So we want people working independently. We want people that are willing to state their opinion, even if it's not a popular opinion. And we get that and we work through it, and we try to figure out, what's best for our team and what'll work for us here in Cincinnati.
Jonah Williams made a public trade request. Is that something you consider over the course of draft weekend, or you just view that as we expect Jonah to come in and play right tackle?
I don't have any updates on Jonah. He's a member of our team. He's a valuable member of our team, and if that changes, you guys will be the first to know. But right now, that hasn't changed.